It was a late evening in the small town of Willow Creek. The sky was dark and heavy. Clouds had covered every corner of the horizon. A strong wind was blowing through the streets, shaking the old wooden houses and rattling the windows. Snow had started falling hours earlier, but now it was coming down fast, thick and heavy, covering everything in a thick white blanket. The roads were empty, and the few cars that tried to drive carefully disappeared into the snowstorm. The whole town seemed quiet, almost like the world had stopped moving. In the middle of this storm, there was a small, cozy house at the end of a quiet street. Smoke was rising slowly from its chimney, and the warm yellow light from the windows gave the house a welcoming glow. Inside, a black grandma named Clara was sitting in her favorite chair by the fireplace. She was knitting a scarf, her fingers moving quickly and carefully, while the fire crackled softly. She loved cold nights like this because they gave her time to think, remember old memories, and enjoy the quiet. Clara was not a young woman. Her hair was gray and soft, and her face had lines that told stories of many years of life. But her eyes were bright, full of warmth and kindness. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her as a strong, caring woman who always helped anyone in need. She had lived in Willow Creek all her life and had seen many winters, but she had never seen a storm like this one. The wind howled outside, and the snow hit the windows like tiny hammers, making it almost impossible to hear anything else. She moved to the kitchen to check on the soup she had cooking. The aroma of vegetables, spices, and warm broth filled the small house. Clara smiled to herself, feeling proud that she could make something simple but comforting on such a cold night. She liked cooking, especially when she could make enough for extra people. Helping others had always been her way of life. Her house was small, but it was always open to anyone who needed a meal, a warm place, or even just someone to talk to. Outside, the storm grew stronger. Snowflakes fell so thickly that it was hard to see more than a few feet ahead. The trees swayed in the wind, and the branches scraped against each other, making a strange, eerie sound. Clara's cat Whiskers curled up in her lap, purring softly, but even he seemed a little nervous about the storm. The town's streetlights were barely visible through the snow, and the silence was broken only by the occasional howl of the wind or the distant creak of a roof. Under the weight of the snow, suddenly, Clara thought she heard something unusual. At first, she ignored it, thinking it was just the wind playing tricks. But the sound came again, a low, rumbling noise, like engines struggling to move through the storm. Clara put down her knitting and walked to the window. Peering through the frost, she could barely make out dark shapes moving slowly on the road. She squinted, trying to understand what they were. It took her a few moments to realize they were motorcycles. Big motorcycles with heavy riders moving carefully through the deep snow. Clara's heart skipped a beat. Who would be out in this storm on motorcycles? She knew it was dangerous. Even her brave neighbors would not attempt to drive in such weather. But here they were, 9 of them, struggling through the blizzard, their lights flickering in the snow. Clara felt a mix of worry and curiosity. She had seen many kinds of people in her life, but the way these riders moved, their confidence and the way they handled their bikes, told her they were not ordinary riders. They were experienced, strong, and maybe even dangerous. Still, she could not leave them outside in the storm. No matter who they were, no one deserved to be caught alone in such freezing weather. She moved quickly, putting on her thick coat and sturdy boots. She grabbed a heavy flashlight and opened her front door, feeling the icy wind hit her face. Snowflakes stuck to her hair and coat, but she did not care. From her doorstep, she could see the riders struggling to keep their balance. The snow was already up to the wheels, and it was clear that if they did not find help soon, they could get hurt or worse. Clara raised her flashlight and waved them toward her. At first, the bikers hesitated, unsure if they should stop. But seeing a warm light in the middle of the storm gave them hope. Slowly, carefully, they guided their motorcycles toward her house. Clara felt her heart beating fast. She knew this night would be remembered, not because of the snowstorm, but because of what was about to happen next. Inside, the house smelled even warmer and more inviting now that the fire was roaring and the soup was ready. Clara did not know who these riders were yet, but she knew one thing. She would not let anyone suffer in her home, not on this night, not ever. And as the first motorcycle reached the snowy driveway, she took a deep breath, ready to face whatever the strange, cold night had brought to her doorstep. The wind outside still screamed through the streets of Willow Creek, carrying sharp, icy flakes that stung the skin of anyone brave enough to face them. Inside her small, warm house, Clara watched the shadows of the motorcycles move through the thick white curtain of snow. Her heart pounded as she realized that these riders were not just regular travelers. They were a group of 9 men, each wearing heavy leather jackets, gloves, and helmets. Their bikes struggled through the snow like wild animals fighting a storm. Clara's first thought was fear. She had heard stories about bikers like these. They were known in the news as the Hells Angels, a group with a reputation for toughness and danger. People often avoided them, whispering warnings about trouble wherever they went. But as she watched them struggle through the snow, her fear mixed with a strange feeling of compassion. These men were human, just like anyone else, and tonight, the storm had made them vulnerable. Without a second thought, Clara opened the front door wider, letting the warmth of her home spill out into the cold. The wind whipped her coat around her body and made the flashlight in her hand flicker. Snowflakes landed on her hair and eyelashes, but she ignored it. She had lived a long life and seen many storms, but this one felt different. Something about the way these men were fighting the blizzard made her heart ache. They needed help, and she could not turn them away. The first rider approached cautiously, his boots crunching on the snow. He took off his helmet and shook his head, sending snowflakes flying like tiny crystals. His face was rough and weathered, with eyes that had seen a lifetime of hard roads. Clara smiled gently. "Come inside," she called over the howl of the wind. "You don't have to stay out here." The man hesitated for a moment, clearly surprised that someone was offering kindness instead of shouting or locking their door. Then, slowly, he nodded. One by one, the other 8 riders followed, their engines growling and sputtering as they navigated the snowy driveway. Some of them laughed nervously, others cursed softly at the storm, but all of them were tired, shivering, and clearly grateful for a safe place to stop. Clara stepped aside, holding the door open. "Hurry in before you freeze," she said. Her voice was calm, soft, but carried a strange authority that made them listen. They filed inside one by one, shedding helmets and coats, revealing tattooed arms, scars, and rough hands. The smell of leather, gasoline, and cold snow filled her home, mixing strangely with the warm, spicy aroma of the soup she had prepared. The men looked around, amazed at the cozy little house. A fire crackled in the fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Clara's kitchen table was already set with bowls and spoons, and a large pot of steaming soup waited to be served. Whiskers, her black and white cat, eyed the newcomers warily but stayed on Clara's lap, purring softly. For a moment, everyone paused, taking in the warmth and safety of the house, far from the chaos of the storm outside. One of the men, who seemed to be the oldest, stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said in a low, gravelly voice, we didn't expect anyone to be out here, especially not in this weather." Clara smiled and shook her head. "I don't believe in leaving anyone out in the cold," she said simply. "Come sit and warm up. You've had a long ride." They hesitated at first, unsure how to respond to her calm kindness. But as Clara ladled the hot soup into bowls and handed them out, their nervous tension slowly melted away. The first spoonful brought surprised smiles. The warmth spread through their bodies, warming not just their muscles, but their hearts. It was unusual strangers showing genuine care. In the middle of a storm that seemed determined to destroy everything. Clara asked them gently, where were you all headed in this blizzard?" The men exchanged glances. Finally, the oldest spoke. "We were on our way to the next town. The storm. We didn't see it coming. Roads went white in minutes. We couldn't stop, couldn't turn back. We were stuck." His voice trailed off. There was no pride in his words, only honesty. Clara nodded, understanding. "I know what it's like to be caught in a storm. But now you're safe. Rest, eat, and warm up. No one should ever face a night like this alone." Her words were simple, yet filled with a power that made even the toughest biker feel small and human. Slowly, laughter and conversation began to fill the small house. The bikers shared stories of their travels, their challenges, and their lives on the road. Clara listened, offering advice, gentle humor, and understanding nods. She did not judge them for who they were or what they had done. She saw them simply as people in need, and that was enough to form a bridge of trust between them. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside Clara's house, it felt like a different world. A world where kindness could melt fear, and strangers could become allies. Little did Clara know that this night, this storm, and these unexpected visitors would change her life forever, and theirs. Clara could see the exhaustion on their faces. The 9 bikers had come inside with frozen fingers and red noses, their heavy boots leaving wet marks across the floor. Snow clung to their jackets and helmets, turning into little puddles that quickly began to melt on the warm tiles. She shook her head with a small, knowing smile. "You've had a rough ride," she said softly. "Let's fix that first." She guided them to the living room, where a thick rug lay in front of the fireplace. The fire's warm glow danced across the walls, creating shadows that seemed alive. She handed each of them a blanket she had folded neatly earlier, and one by one, they wrapped themselves in it. The heat immediately began to seep into their frozen limbs, and a few of them let out audible sighs of relief. Clara felt satisfaction welling up in her chest. This was why she always kept extra blankets. She had a habit of preparing for unexpected guests, especially on nights like this. "Sit down," she said, motioning to the chairs and small couch near the fire. The men obeyed, looking around her home with a mixture of awe and disbelief. It was simple, yes, but it radiated warmth, care, and life. Clara moved toward the kitchen, returning with steaming bowls of soup. The aroma filled the room, mixing with the faint smell of burning wood from the fireplace. One by one, she placed the bowls in front of each man. "Eat while it's hot," she said. "It will help warm you from the inside." The bikers hesitated for a moment, unsure how to respond. They were used to rough roads, tough conditions, and facing danger head-on, but never to a stranger showing such straightforward kindness. Slowly, they picked up their spoons and took tentative bites. Then, almost at once, their eyes widened and small smiles broke across their faces. The soup was simple, but rich and comforting, filled with vegetables, herbs, and a touch of love that could not be measured. Clara watched them carefully, noticing the little things, the way one man rubbed his hands together to bring warmth back into his fingers. Another shivered despite the fire, and one young biker glanced around as if checking to see if this was some kind of trick. Clara chuckled softly. "There's no trick," she said gently. "You're safe here. You're just people, and people deserve care, no matter who they are or what they've done." The words seemed to sink in. Slowly, the tension in the room began to melt, replaced by an uneasy but growing sense of trust. Clara had a way of speaking that made people feel safe. She didn't lecture, she didn't demand, they were simply allowed to be themselves, to rest, to recover. For the bikers, this was a foreign experience. They were used to suspicion, judgment, or fear in the eyes of strangers, but not here, not tonight. As the soup disappeared, Clara went back to the kitchen to fetch hot tea and bread. The clinking of bowls and spoons filled the room, blending with the soft hum of the fire. She handed each man a mug, the steam rising in soft curls. "Drink slowly," she said. "You need it." One of the bikers, the one who seemed the oldest, finally spoke. His voice was rough but not unkind. "Ma'am, you didn't have to do this for us. Most people, they'd lock their doors." Clara smiled warmly. Most people also don't see a human being frozen and struggling in the snow and think only about danger. I see a man who needs warmth. That's all. Tonight, I'm not thinking about clubs or reputations. I'm thinking about kindness. The words hung in the air. They were simple, yet carried a truth that struck everyone. The room was quiet for a moment, only the fire crackling and the wind howling outside. Even the bikers, who were used to tough talk and fearless postures, sat silently, letting her words sink in. After a while, conversation began to flow. Clara asked gentle questions about their journey, their lives on the road, and how they had ended up in this storm. The bikers, slowly but surely, opened up. They told her stories of the long highways, the nights under the stars, the challenges of life on motorcycles. And Clara listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't judge. She simply offered her attention and her warmth, which in that moment was more valuable than anything else they had ever received. Then Clara added something she often said to anyone she helped. Sometimes, the world will test you. Sometimes it will bring storms you cannot avoid. But even in those storms, you can find light if someone is willing to share it with you. The bikers looked at her, some shaking their heads, others nodding slowly. They had never expected to find that kind of wisdom in a small house at the end of a snowy street. One of the younger men even laughed softly. "You're something else, ma'am," he said. "Ain't no way someone like you just sits and waits for strangers in a blizzard. You're special." Clara chuckled, shaking her head. "I just do what I can," she said. And in her heart, she knew that this night, this strange, stormy night, would change everything. Not just for her, but for these men too. By offering help, by showing simple kindness, she had begun a bond that nothing in the world could break. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, 9 bikers felt something they had never expected: safety, warmth, and trust. And Clara? She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that she had done what she had always believed in, helping anyone who needed her, no matter the danger or the reputation. The storm outside showed no sign of slowing. The snow piled high against the windows, and the wind howled like an untamed animal. But inside Clara's small house, the world felt entirely different. The warmth from the fire filled the room, and the soft glow of the lamp created a cocoon of safety around the 9 bikers and their unexpected hostess. After they had eaten their soup and sipped the hot tea, Clara motioned for them to sit closer to the fire. "You're all frozen," she said kindly. "Sit, rest, and warm up. Then, if you want, you can tell me about yourselves. I've always believed that every story matters." The bikers exchanged glances. Usually their lives were private, shared only with those they trusted completely. But something about Clara made them feel safe, as if the warmth of her heart could shield them from the judgment they always feared. Slowly, the oldest man leaned back in his chair and began to speak. "My name's Hank," he said, his voice low but steady. "I've been riding for more than 30 years. Roads, storms, cities, small towns. I've seen it all. But tonight, this storm almost had us. Never thought I'd be saved by someone like you." He paused, shaking his head. "I mean no offense, ma'am, but people like you don't usually offer help to us." Clara smiled gently. "I offer help to anyone in need," she said softly. "It doesn't matter who they are. Everyone deserves warmth, care, and kindness." Hank nodded, staring into the fire. "You're right," he said slowly. "Out there, life is harsh. We've been judged, avoided, even feared. But here, it's different. You see people, not titles or reputations. One by one, the other bikers began to open up, encouraged by Clara's calm presence. A younger man named Rick spoke about his childhood, growing up in a city where trust was rare. Another, called Sam, shared stories of nights on the highway, sleeping under the stars, always wary of danger. Each story revealed a human side that few people ever saw. They spoke of challenges, regrets, laughter, and lost truths they had buried under leather jackets and tough exteriors. Clara listened quietly, nodding at the right moments, asking small questions, and giving them space to continue. She never interrupted or judged. Instead, she offered understanding, her soft words creating a safe space where honesty could flourish. The bikers, used to hiding emotions, felt a strange relief. For the first time in years, they could just be themselves, no masks, no fear. Hank, the oldest, leaned back, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "It's strange," he said. "I've ridden through storms, deserts, and mountains, but I've never experienced something like this. A stranger, saving us, giving us food, warmth, and listening to our stories. It's humbling." Clara shrugged gently. "Kindness doesn't need to be grand to matter," she said. "Sometimes a small act, like sharing a warm meal or listening to someone, can change a life. Even yours." Rick chuckled softly, wiping the tear from his eye. "You're full of surprises, ma'am. I thought tonight would be just another hard ride, but now, it's one I'll never forget. Never in my life did I think a storm could bring something so human." The room grew quieter as the bikers reflected on her words. Outside, the snow fell relentlessly, but inside, a different kind of storm had passed, the storm of fear, isolation, and mistrust that had followed them for years. Clara had replaced it with warmth, understanding, and acceptance. Then Sam, the quietest of them all, finally spoke. "I don't usually say this," he admitted, "but you remind me that there's still good in the world. And not just little good, big, real, life-saving good. You didn't have to help us, yet you did. You listened, you cared, and somehow you made us feel human again." Clara smiled, her heart softening at their honesty. "That's all any of us can do," she said. "Look out for each other when the world gets cold, when the storm comes. That's how we survive, and that's how we stay human." Hank leaned forward, looking directly at her. "You've done more than save us from the storm," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You've reminded us of something we've forgotten, that people can still care, that trust is still possible, and that even bikers like us can be seen differently, treated kindly. You've changed something tonight." Clara's eyes glistened. She didn't see herself as heroic. She simply did what anyone with a warm heart would do. But hearing their words, seeing the relief and gratitude on their faces, she understood the power of her actions. One night, one storm, one act of help, it had opened a door to something far greater than she imagined. Outside, the wind continued to roar, but inside, there was laughter and conversation. Stories were shared, and bonds quietly formed. The bikers had come as strangers, cold and wary, but they began to see Clara not just as a helper, but as a person who believed in humanity in its purest form. And that night, as the snow piled high and the world outside disappeared behind white walls of snow, 9 men discovered warmth they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. The storm outside raged harder than ever, but inside Clara's cozy home, the atmosphere was calm, almost magical. The fire crackled in the hearth, filling the room with warmth and soft light. The 9 bikers had finished their soup and tea, and now they sat quietly, wrapped in blankets, staring into the fire. Something had shifted in the room. The cold, tense energy they had carried from the storm was replaced with gratitude, respect, and a sense of connection they had not felt in years. Clara moved around the room, making sure everyone had enough blankets, checking if anyone needed another cup of tea. Her presence was steady, comforting, and quietly commanding. She did not speak loudly or demand attention, but somehow everyone listened when she talked. There was an air of authority in her kindness, a power that could not be ignored. Hank, the oldest biker, finally spoke again. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and serious, "we've been through a lot of storms, a lot of dangerous roads. But tonight, you saved our lives." His words were simple, but heavy with meaning. Clara shook her head gently. "I didn't save your lives," she said softly. "I only helped you when you needed it. That's what anyone should do. But I'm glad you're safe." Rick, the youngest of the group, leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "No, ma'am," he said firmly. "It's more than that. Out there, we're used to taking care of ourselves, watching our backs, trusting almost no one. But tonight, you didn't hesitate. You didn't ask who we were. You just helped. That's not something you see every day. That's not something you forget." Clara felt a warm feeling in her chest, but she stayed humble. "I do what I can," she said. "It's just a small act. But kindness, it can make a bigger difference than you think." The bikers exchanged glances. They were used to danger, to solving problems with strength or speed. But this required no violence, no engine roaring, no physical power. It was simple, yet stronger than anything they had encountered. In that moment, they realized the true meaning of trust, care, and respect. Hank straightened in his chair, looking at Clara with deep seriousness. "Ma'am, there's something we want to do," he said. "Something we've never done for anyone. We want to make a promise." "A promise to you?" Clara raised an eyebrow, curious. "A promise?" she asked gently. "Yes," Hank said, his voice steady. "You helped us when no one else would. You risked your safety to give us food, warmth, and shelter. We've seen a lot in our lives, and we know what danger is. But tonight, we realize that there's someone worth protecting. That someone is you." The room went silent. Clara felt a lump in her throat. She had lived her life helping others, never expecting anything in return. She had helped neighbors, strangers, and even animals, but she had never been offered protection, loyalty, or a promise from anyone. She looked at the bikers, studying their faces. They were serious, sincere, and unwavering. Sam, the quietest biker, nodded. "We swear," he said, his voice soft but firm. "No matter what happens, no matter the danger, we will protect you. You helped us when no one else would. We owe you that, and more than that. We want to honor your courage and kindness. From this day forward, we'll be here if you need us." Rick added, "We don't take promises lightly. We live by our word. And tonight, we're giving you our word. You helped us. Now it's our turn to help you." Clara felt tears forming in her eyes. She had never imagined that helping strangers could create such a deep, powerful connection. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "I only did what felt right." Hank smiled, a rare soft expression on his rugged face. "Then let this be our way of saying thank you," he said. "A promise is stronger than any storm, stronger than any road, stronger than any danger we face. We'll keep it, ma'am. You have our word." Clara felt her heart swell with emotion. The room, filled with the warmth of the fire and the snowstorm raging outside, felt sacred. Here were 9 men, known for toughness and fearlessness, offering loyalty and protection to a single woman simply because she had shown them kindness. It was unexpected, extraordinary, and beautiful. She looked at each one of them and smiled softly. "If I ever need help, I will remember this night," she said. "And I will never forget your words." Hank nodded. "You won't have to remember, ma'am," he said. "We'll be here, watching, caring, protecting. That's a promise for life." Outside, the blizzard continued, but inside Clara's home, a bond had been forged that no storm could ever break. In that small living room, the warmth of human kindness, trust, and gratitude created something stronger than snow, ice, or fear. 9 Hell's Angels had made a promise they intended to keep for the rest of their lives. And Clara, The black grandma who had opened her door on a stormy night had unknowingly created a legacy of loyalty and love that would endure forever. The blizzard had passed by morning, leaving the streets of Willow Creek blanketed in pure white. Snowdrifts lined the sidewalks and icicles hung from rooftops like crystal daggers. But inside Clara's warm little house, there was no sign of the harshness outside. The fire still glowed in the hearth, and the aroma of fresh coffee and warm bread filled the air. The night's events had created a quiet calm, a peace that seemed almost magical after the chaos of the storm. The 9 bikers were getting ready to leave, their motorcycles now polished with scraped-off snow, their gloves dried near the fire. Yet something in the room had changed. What had started as a simple act of kindness had transformed into a bond deeper than any of them had expected. Clara watched them, her heart full, knowing that tonight, she was no longer just a grandmother in a small town. She was a part of a pact that would last a lifetime. Hank, the oldest biker, stepped forward and adjusted his jacket. "We promised we'd protect you," he said, his voice calm but full of conviction. "And that promise isn't just for today or tomorrow. It's forever. No matter where we are, no matter what happens, we'll be there for you." Clara smiled gently, a warmth spreading through her chest. "I never expected this," she said softly. "I only did what I thought was right." Rick, the youngest of the bikers, laughed quietly. "That's the thing, ma'am. That's exactly why we're making this promise. You didn't ask for it, you didn't expect it, but you gave anyway. That makes it real. That makes it worth protecting." The bikers had packed their gear, but none of them seemed eager to leave. There was a strange, unspoken understanding between them and Clara. It wasn't just gratitude. They felt respect, admiration, even a kind of affection that only forms in moments of shared humanity. They had come to her door as strangers in the storm, and they were leaving as allies, forever linked by a night that none of them would ever forget. Before they mounted their motorcycles, Hank turned to Clara. "We're not just leaving you alone in this world anymore. You can call us if you need anything, no matter what time it is. If trouble comes your way, we'll be there. That's our word, always." Clara felt a lump in her throat. She had spent decades helping neighbors and strangers, never asking for anything in return. But tonight, she realized that her kindness had created a ripple one that had returned to her in the form of loyalty, protection, and trust. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what to say, except that I'll remember this forever." Sam, the quietest biker, spoke from the back. "You don't have to say anything, ma'am. Your actions spoke louder than words ever could. That's why we made this bond. That's why we'll always watch out for you." The group mounted their motorcycles, the engines roaring to life, but the sound felt less threatening now. The men moved with care, glancing back at Clara's house one last time. There was a mutual understanding. This was not a farewell, it was the start of something permanent. The snow crunched beneath the tires as they disappeared down the street, leaving only tracks in the fresh snow as evidence they had ever been there. For Clara, the house felt different now. The walls seemed warmer, the fire brighter, and the quiet seemed less lonely. She knew that the storm had brought more than danger. It had brought connection, loyalty, and a promise that would endure. The memory of their eyes, their sincere words, and the warmth of their presence would remain with her always. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. True to their promise, the bikers checked on her regularly. They came by during storms, brought supplies when roads were difficult, and always made sure she was safe. Over time, the neighborhood began to notice the unusual friendship. People whispered about the black grandma and the 9 bikers who had pledged their protection, shaking their heads in disbelief, but always with a sense of admiration. It wasn't just about protection. The bikers shared laughs with her, helped with chores, and even joined her for occasional meals. They told stories of the road, and she told stories of her life, her childhood, and the lessons she had learned. Every visit strengthened their bond, transforming it from a promise into a genuine friendship. Clara realized something important. Acts of kindness have a power that is impossible to measure. She had thought she was helping strangers in need, but in reality, she had created a network of loyalty and love that went far beyond her small house or the stormy night. She had reminded them and herself of the strength of human connection. One evening, as the sun set behind the snow-covered hills, Clara stood by her window and watched the bikers ride past, their engines soft in the distance. She smiled, feeling safe and grateful. The storm had tested them all, but it had also revealed something extraordinary, a lifelong bond forged in kindness, trust, and respect. It was a bond that no weather could break, no distance could erase, and no time could diminish. Clara knew she would never be alone again, and the bikers knew that they had found someone worth protecting, not for fame or fear, but for the simple reason that she had seen the humanity in them when no one else did. That night, that storm, had created a family of sorts, a family not of blood, but of loyalty, gratitude, and shared humanity. And so, life in Willow Creek continued, but with a subtle magic that no one could deny. A black grandma had opened her door in a blizzard, and 9 Hells Angels had opened their hearts in return. The promise made on that stormy night had become a bond that would last a lifetime. The years passed, but the story of that snowy night in Willow Creek never faded. Clara's little house, once just a cozy home at the edge of town, had become a symbol of warmth, courage, and humanity. People whispered about the black grandma who had helped 9 Hells Angels during the blizzard, and how her simple act of kindness had forged a lifelong bond with men who were feared by many. Clara herself never sought attention. She continued her daily life quietly, tending her garden, cooking meals, and helping neighbors in small, thoughtful ways. Yet the impact of that one night radiated far beyond her front door. She realized that kindness is like planting seeds. Sometimes you cannot see the result immediately, but over time, the effects grow stronger, wider, and more beautiful than you ever imagined. The 9 bikers remained true to their promise. On cold nights, they would check in, bringing firewood, groceries, or just company. When neighbors faced emergencies, the bikers were there too, often quietly helping, inspired by the example Clara had set. Her actions had created ripples in the community that went far beyond her house or the blizzard that had started it all. People began to see that trust and humanity could exist even in unexpected places. Clara often thought about that night. The storm had been fierce, almost dangerous, but it had also been a turning point. It taught her, and everyone involved, that courage is not just about facing storms outside. It's about facing the storm within, the storm of fear, mistrust, and doubt. By opening her door, by offering warmth, she had faced her own courage and shown the bikers a different way of living. The bikers, in turn, carried her lessons with them wherever they went. Hank, Rick, Sam, and the others would often tell stories on the road about the woman who had treated them as humans when the world judged them only by reputation. They spoke of her generosity, wisdom, and bravery, not in a boastful way, but as a reminder to themselves and others of the power of kindness. In bars, on highways, or around campfires, the story spread, inspiring others to look beyond appearances and show compassion. Clara's neighbors began to notice the change too. Some were skeptical at first, wondering why the Hells Angels were suddenly visiting a grandmother regularly. But as they saw the respect, care, and genuine loyalty the bikers showed her, doubts turned into admiration. People realized that one act of kindness can inspire respect, loyalty, and even courage in others. It could change hearts and minds, and sometimes even change the way a community thought about itself. One winter evening, years after that first blizzard, Clara sat by her fireplace with Whiskers on her lap. She reflected on the journey. It all started with one choice, she thought to herself. One simple decision to open the door, share warmth, and listen. That was all it took to create something bigger than myself. She smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. Her life had not been extraordinary in fame or wealth, but it had been extraordinary in impact. She had taught a lesson in humanity without even trying, simply by being herself. The bikers never forgot the promise they had made. On birthdays, holidays, or during storms, they would arrive at her door, not out of obligation, but because they truly cared. They became her family in a way that transcended blood, a living testament to the bond formed in a single extraordinary night. And through them, Clara's kindness reached far beyond Willow Creek, touching lives she would never even see. Clara understood something profound. True legacy is not measured in money, fame, or material achievements. It is measured in the lives you touch, the trust you build, and the inspiration you leave behind. The night she helped the 9 bikers was not just about a storm or survival. It was about showing that even in a world filled with fear, there is space for courage, trust, and unwavering humanity. Her story began to spread further, reaching local newspapers, social gatherings, and eventually online. People were fascinated not by the danger of the Hells Angels, but by the kindness of one brave woman who treated strangers with dignity and compassion. Clara's actions became a reminder. Small acts of humanity can create lifelong bonds, spark change, and inspire others to do the same. As she grew older, Clara often thought about the long road her life had taken. She had faced hardships, losses, and lonely nights, but that stormy night had reminded her of the beauty of human connection. Through her kindness, she had created safety, loyalty, and love that endured far beyond the storm. And through the bikers, she had proven that even the toughest, most feared people could respond to goodness with loyalty and respect. Clara passed her lessons on quietly, sharing her wisdom with neighbors, friends, and children who visited her. She taught them that bravery is not only in grand gestures, but in simple acts, feeding someone, listening, offering warmth. That legacy, simple, human, and powerful, would last long after she was gone. And so, the story of the Black Grandma and the 9 Hells Angels became a legend in Willow Creek, not a legend of fear, danger, or violence, but a legend of trust, courage, and humanity. It reminded everyone who heard it that even in the coldest storms, a single act of kindness can change lives forever. Clara's legacy lived on, inspiring generations to open their doors, share their warmth, and never underestimate the power of being human.